My name is Dan McCourt. Little background. Started my life as an F-4 pilot right out of the training command and went to the West Coast to VF-154. Following that tour, I did a tour at Top Gun. Following that tour, I did a transition to F-14s, then another tour back to Top Gun. Down the road, a transition to F-18s. Had the opportunity to fly an exchange tour with the Dutch Air Force, flying F-104s. An exchange tour with the Air Force, flying both F-5s and some interesting airplanes up in the northern ranges. Got a lot of flight time and a lot of traps, many squadrons. Ended up in VF-111, which by coincidence was the same squadron that my dad had been in World War II as a fighter pilot flying Hellcats and Corsairs. So that was quite an experience for me to in fact take my father on deployment on a Tiger cruise and have him walk into the ready room of a ship, and they pulled out the logbooks and the photos from his day, and of course his pictures were in it, and we had a really good time doing that. That led to a small video that we made at NAS Miramar back when it was a Naval Air Station. Anyway, following my fighter pilot time, I had an opportunity to come down here to Pensacola and take over as Commodore, and in the meantime, with a lot of operational experience, learned a little bit more about the town and got very much involved in the inner workings of Pensacola and a little more of its history and heritage. Now, an aside along the way, when I was in 154 as a very, very new Nugget pilot, preparing for my first deployment, it turned out that my sister, Peggy, was going to be married up in Michigan. So we're in San Diego. I got one of my best friends, Doc White, one of my other best friends who is a radar intercept officer, or RIO, Chris Allison, call sign Sniffer, who flew with me, and we took two airplanes, two Phantoms, up to Michigan, landed at Sulphur's Air Force Base, and to attend the wedding. Now, of course, this is my first time taking the go-fast, smoking, hulking Phantom back home to show both my dad, my family, and brothers and sisters and so forth, what I'm doing with my life. So an opportunity that could not be passed up. The wedding, of course, was in the spring. It was a beautiful day. We fly across country, and we descend down and head towards Sulphur's Air Force Base to enter the break and want to look really good for the family. So we had briefed a proper, what we call fan break at high speed, lots of noise, even though it was an Air Force base, recognizing that generally is not really happily received, but nonetheless, we figured that was the way to go. The good news is the weather was perfect. The break went well. The bad news is there was an airplane on the runway. So at the very, very approach end of the runway, there was a T-39 Sabreliner, and it was a VIP Sabreliner. And by coincidence, in that airplane on that day was a general by the name of Chappie James, hence the tie into Pensacola. So here's me, young fighter pilot, Lieutenant JG, into the break, pulling 6 Gs and descending, realizing that the speed is not going to allow me to touch down without the other airplane still being on the runway. So Tower, of course, sees this as well, and halfway through the turn, they advise that I'm going to need to go around to provide proper clearance for the T-39. Well, not being one to pass up the opportunity with my family watching to show them what the F-4 can do, I simply told my wingman that we're going to go around in section, plugged in the afterburners, and continued to descend as I raised the landing gear and the flaps. So this was looking really good. When the F-4 at low altitude and configuration will accelerate pretty well and make some pretty good noise. So I'm probably doing, easily 450, 500 knots about the approach end of the runway as I fly just a couple feet over the top of this T-39, thinking we're looking really good. So I blow by it and thump it really good, and then my wingman does the same thing. And then at the other end of the field, of course, I pitch up to give it room for its departure. Now, little did I know that there was this very senior Air Force officer inside that airplane. And even less did I know that the pilot at the controls of that airplane was an Air Force major worried about his career and what the general might be thinking. So here's where the story gets interesting. We do the whole weekend thing because this is a weekend cross country. And when I come back on Monday, actually arrive on Sunday, when I come to work on Monday, the first words I get are, you need to come and see the skipper. And the skipper needs to come and see the CAG. And the CAG needs to come and see the battle group commander. Because what had happened is that the Air Force 04 flying that airplane had reported a near miss and a low flyby, very unsafely done, to his command. That, of course, rocketed the information vertically up to the stratosphere and then laterally from the Air Force over to the Navy and back down through the chain of command over to the blast in the chest that my skipper got, that turned into a blast in the chest for me. And then, of course, what came out of all this is that the Air Force was after my wings. So here I am, a newly minted Air Force fighter pilot, or Navy fighter pilot, about to lose my wings. It became very clear now this was very serious. So I had two things going for me that were very important. One, a terrific CO. His call sign was Mighty Mac. And Mighty Mac was a bulldog of a guy who was not going to stand there and let the Air Force basically blow up one of his young JOs. That was good news, as opposed to him trying to cover his own butt and see to it that it all went well. He just fired me. Then the other, as it turns out, while all this is going on, word filters up once the CAG shows up and he tears up on my CO. CO's still protecting me. CAG's not so much protecting me, but he's still worthy of in the fight. He doesn't want to just give up to the Air Force. And this thing is ratcheting up in terms of chain of command elevation to the point where it's gotten into the stars, as in general officer and Navy flag officer level, doing this battle. It's also very clear that it's going to end up with me losing my wings. Here's the point where happily, because up to now, General James had not been apprised of any of this. And as it turns out, General James was an F-4 guy from Vietnam. General James loves Phantoms. And in fact, when I went over and my wingman went over the top of his airplane, he was back in the airplane rooting and having a good time at the sound and smell of afterburners flying right over top the airplane. So when word finally got to him that something was going on and that the guy who did all that stuff was about to lose his wings, he happily, for me, stepped up and said, "Stop all this nonsense. He was just doing what young fighter pilots should do. I want this to come to an end right now." And so as a result of that, I had this happily long, illustrious career in the Navy, flying airplanes, and still have my wings to this day. So my story, as a result, a personal opportunity to meet Chappie James and thank him for his stepping in and basically saving my butt. And that was back in the year 1976. It was near the bicentennial of the country and a pretty interesting time. My story with me and General Chappie James.
Hi, my name is Michael Kissick. My call sign was Butch. I was a F-14 Rio back in the 80s and 90s. My experience with Top Gun was I was in VF-211, and the school is for teaching people to be teachers. So what you do is when you go to that school, you may or may not be the best pilot or Rio in the squadron, but you have enough time to pay back the squadron by doing a tour as the training officer. So you'll be the pilot training officer or the Rio training officer for at least a year or so. And you'll come back and instill all the things that you learned while you were at Top Gun and teach it to your squadron, because they can't afford to send everybody.
Work climb takeoff, check spark back off. Maneuver, our solo section takeoff. Six, check spark back off. Throw them up. Here we go. Love this stuff. Off brakes now. Blowers ready now. Here we go. We're going. There we go. He hit it.
Hi, welcome to Wings Aviation. My name is Michael Kissick. Everyone calls me Butch, though, my whole life. I served over 28 years in 4 deployed ships and fighter squadrons of the U.S. Navy, and I was lucky enough to be in the back seat of the F-14 Tomcat. The store is much more than a retail outlet though. If you remember Trader John's from back in the day, you'd feel very familiar with the rooms and exhibits of naval aviation memorabilia and history that's been collected over 40 years. Wings Aviation is primarily known for the development and sale of the 9G Plus kneeboard. It's a NavAir tested and approved solution utilized by every Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard pilot and air crewmen and naval flight officers. My experience was in April 1986. I went to Top Gun as what was called a spare. And so the primary crew was guaranteed that they would get the hops. If the squadron has enough budget back in those days, they would allow you to become, you could attend the school, go through all the academics and all those parts. And then and you manned an airplane and it was turning, and if somebody who was from the regular crews didn't show up, you went and launched as a spare. So back in those days, the conventional wisdom was you'd never get enough hops to complete the program, but you did the briefs and the debriefs and all the academics and all that. And so you benefited from it. I graduated with 25 of the 27 hops completed as a spare. And so they let us graduate with the rest of the people in the class. I was the public affairs officer in my squadron, VF-211, and as a recent graduate, it afforded me a lot of opportunity to be interviewed on radio and TV and all that stuff, because they needed somebody who was a recent graduate of the school, but also who knew what was current and going on at the time. So it led to attending concerts and things with the DJs that we adopted. We gave them flight simulator tours, and actually got to go on stage with Kenny Loggins and get called out in our flight suits. The person I went through Top Gun with is Kim Callahan, call sign Claw. And he got that name Claw from an inadvertent trap that he took. He was flying a T-2 and didn't know his hook was down. And so when he came into land, he got a sort of unpleasant surprise, an unplanned arrested landing. He wasn't ready for it. So they called him Claw from then on. And been a good friend of mine all through the time we were in the squadron and even subsequent to that. The current movie is extremely impressive. Waited 36 years to see that stuff. I was there when they were filming the first one, and had great hopes. But when I actually went to see that with a bunch of my Top Gun buddies, I was so impressed. The movie adds realism. It's also true to the story. So it fills in some of the gaps about the characters. We get to meet the new characters. Just one of the really finest movies that I've seen in all the time. The flying sequences actually made me kind of sweaty sometimes, because having been there, the way that they pop the ridges and things like that, when you go up, you turn inverted and then you pull back down on the backside, which reduces your signature to air-to-air missiles or surface-to-air missiles. So the feeling of popping those ridges, it's very exciting, and the photography was extremely true to life. And got my heart racing a little bit, because I remember doing that very same thing. So in the F-14, I'm a radar intercept officer. I sit in the back. The seating would be similar in the F-18F, which is the two-seat version that they portrayed in the movie. So Bob, baby on board, that would be the equivalent. Although in the F-18 they're called WISOs, weapons systems officers, not like us. We were specialists in air intercept, but our duties are primarily being a co-pilot. So we also do the radio calls. In fact, even the lowering of the canopy is done by the guy in the back seat. So my platform was F-14. It would equate most closely to the F-18F and a two-seat cockpit. And the way it's depicted in the movie, some of the chats and social media pages, there's people on there who were not experienced with the carrier aviation or whatever, and they kind of, I call them out now and then because they badmouth the actors. And from what I've seen from the documentaries and stuff, they went through a very rigorous training program that would equate them to being a specialized weapons systems officer. The particular one that I called out, he goes, they never were allowed to touch the controls. And I'm like, so does that include if the airplane was on fire, could they pull the ejection handle? Because I know they were trained to do that. And that's what I would call the ultimate flight control, getting out of the airplane. So there's a lot of buzz in the media about the movie. But from my perspective, the flight sequences around the carrier and stuff were extremely realistic because that's where they were. And things haven't changed radically since 1986 or the 90s when I was flying off the carrier. The principles and procedures are all pretty much the same as they were back when I was flying. So true to life experience.
Hi, my name is Captain Tim Kinsella. I'm the commanding officer of Naval Air Station Pensacola. It is an absolute honor for me to be here today, just to witness Dick Pace to get up in the air again in this aircraft, this SMJ Texan, and not just for him to fly it, an aircraft that he flew during World War II, both as a student and as an instructor pilot, but to do it in the same airspace over NAS Pensacola that he flew in an aircraft just like this almost 80 years ago. It is absolutely amazing to do. It's unfortunate to say that men like Dick Pace are a dying breed, and to be here with him today, it is as much for us as it is for him. I mean, what a Christmas present to be able to give this man. This has been a tough year for everybody, and what a great way to ring out the year, to end it on such a wonderful note. Opportunities like that only come along once in a lifetime, and I'm very, very honored and privileged, and it is not lost on me what a great honor it was to do that today.
The flight went great. We were in the back. We had headsets on and intercom, so we were able to talk the whole time. It was an absolutely great day to fly. Clear blue skies, fantastic visibility. When we flew over the water, it was the only word you can really think of is stunning. It was blue. You could see the sandbars out there. He was having a good time when we were talking. So we did a few wing overs over the beach and showed off our smoke system, which he was pretty enthusiastic about. So it was a great time. I love flying these airplanes. It's a very unique opportunity to be sponsored by Geico and have the ability to fly these airplanes, but even more unique was to take a piece of the flying history and actually take it to a piece of living history and fly with Dick today. He actually flew these airplanes in World War II, trained the world's greatest generation, and kind of kind of put those two pieces of the puzzle together is a very unique experience. It was pretty neat when somebody of his vintage, somebody that actually taught in these airplanes in World War II, got out, shook my hand, and told me that I was smooth and that he would give me a sign-off.
As we say, it's our best Christmas present ever, and we thank you, and that makes for a good one.
Now you mentioned that you may or may not have had a near-death experience
Yeah.
while you're out there.
Yeah. We were coming into El Centro. The mission had taken us over the tax range, which is east of Yuma. It's an instrumented range. For those who don't know, you carry a pod on the airplane and it documents. You can come back and play it all back. That's what you see in the movie Top Gun. You see the airplanes moving around and stuff. So we were coming back. I was flying with Kim Callahan, the guy I went through Top Gun with. And we come back to El Centro. The arrival procedures there, almost always VFR procedures. So 50 miles out, El Centro jet landing. El Centro jet landing, they tell you the runway, and it's like asking for the carrier brake, which the carrier brake is supposed to be done at 800 feet. But when Navy pilots ask for the carrier brake, it's somewhere between 400 and 800, whatever you can do. And at El Centro, they didn't care because it's 30 feet below sea level, so you can't mess up too badly. So, all right, we know that our troops are out there standing around. We're coming back after this complete mission. And so we requested the carrier brake. We come into the brake at about 500 plus miles an hour. And purely to show off, we start the brake at about 6.5 Gs, and then Claw selects afterburner. So insult to injury, you start to go around, and now you're doing an afterburner turn over the field at about 500 feet, maybe, whatever. And as we get into the turn, the G comes on the airplane, and he's pulling pretty hard. At about 7 Gs, my vision starts to go like this.
And why was that?
G-induced loss of consciousness.
No, but
Oh,
normally,
yeah. Normally my G-suit would be plugged in.
right?
And normally Claw's G-suit would be plugged in too. But for some reason, they both came out. Neither one of us was wearing our G-suit. So that would give you some immunity up to about 6 Gs, and we were trained and stuff. But above 7, with no G-suit, and you're not ready for it, that sudden rapid onset of G, because the G-suit isn't helping you, is going to put you to sleep. And there's a ton of mishaps that happen. So I remember the last thing that I saw was I was looking down at the DDD in front of me, and it looked like the ground was bigger than the sky, and that's a bad thing. And it occurred to me that I should eject. I felt like I should eject. I wanted to, except I couldn't move my hands or arms. If I could have moved my arms, I would have ejected. And then sleep. So then I wake up, and we're still in the airplane, heading on the downwind. We're at about 300 feet or so. And Claw had trimmed up the airplane Thank the Lord that he had it trimmed up, and his motor muscles or whatever were working properly, even though he was also G-locked. We're on the downwind, and we're now at about 3 miles downwind, out over a bunch of onion fields and stuff. I'm looking at fences, and they're really big. And I can hear the tower, but it's not really registering crop. You know, it's like, nah, 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 nah. There's stuff going on in my ear set, and they're yelling at us. And they're like, Nickel 105, what are you doing? What are you doing? And it's like, I go, hey, Claw, what are you doing? And I go, you got it? And he goes, yeah, I got it. And he's pretty groggy too. And then he starts to wake up and realize. So this is a really insidious thing, the loss of consciousness. By all rights, we probably should have died there. And we get on the downwind. So he starts climbing up. We turn, and now we're shooting a straight in from about 4 miles out. And when we landed, first thing I did was didn't even debrief or do anything. I went right to the skipper and I go, hey, you know, I'm going to fess up here. We were showing off in the break, and we both G-locked and passed out in the airplane. And it was because neither one of us had our G-suits on, and we don't know why they weren't plugged in, because part of your checklist is G-suit, test it when you get in. But through the course of a flight or something, you can come undone when you're moving around in the airplane and stuff. It can come undone. And so that was one of the 2 times where I thought that I should have ejected, but I was incapacitated and I couldn't. And that it kind of makes me think back on it a lot. It's like we were showing off. We were trying to do a little air show for the troops,
Right.
give them an afterburner break, and it could have killed both of us, maybe people on the ground. And we never did that after that. That was sort of a life lesson that we didn't try to repeat.
I avoided a call sign for the longest time. There were a couple in my JO tour, like every junior officer, you make nugget mistakes, and they try to make it stick, and more of a nickname from my real name kind of came up, but nothing really stuck from my JO tour. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you view it, by the time I became a department head and I was an officer in charge deployed with 2 helicopters and a 35 team, we were in South Korea, and that's kind of what I like to say is this one time in South Korea, and that's where the story ends. But the reality is we were being hosted by an Army unit at Camp Humphreys in Korea, and might have had a couple of sailors that might have smarted off at some MPs, or allegedly something to that nature. And I was able to work with the CO of the other unit, and everybody was okay and nobody got in trouble. So my JOs thought that it was pretty epic that I guess that I just quote unquote took care of business. And they started looking for synonyms of some terms that they were thinking of, and one of my very industrious lieutenants found in some dictionary somewhere that Mama-san was a woman who controlled men. And so they called home unbeknownst to me. They had a patch made while we were in Korea that just had wings and Mama-san put on it. I did not know that. They had called home and talked to the CO and said, hey, we have a proposal for Lieutenant Commander Newman for a call sign review. And I don't know what, to this day, I still don't know what story they told him or what they think they know that they told him. But we got back underway because we were there for a couple of weeks, and we embarked back on our ship to continue on the deployment. And we're having this maintenance meeting with my MO and my OPSO, and we're looking at what our next series of events were going to be. And this industrious lieutenant comes through the hatch, and I just see this hand kind of reaching, and what in the world are you doing? He grabs my normal patch, and it was like a ninja. Before I could figure out what was going on. He's halfway out the door and he's back slapping this other patch that they had made, and it was just wings and Mama-san and halfway crooked on my Velcro. And what in the world is this? I never saw my other patch again. Never saw it again. I called after that meeting, and and they're all laughing. Everybody in the meeting was laughing, and because everybody else was in on it except for me. And I wound up calling the skipper from the POTS line just to say, ops normal, we're underway. Quick report that everybody's well, 10 fingers and 10 toes kind of thing. And he picks up the phone and goes, "Hey, Mama-san." What in the world? They had done all this in less than 2 weeks, because the incident was probably about 4 days in, and they had done all this, and it was a fait accompli. And that's forevermore how I've been known. So it stuck. There was no getting rid of that one. So yeah, as I just like to say, I take care of business.